Go support Kenshi 618. Chapter 18, Black Budget Project. In the training room basement beneath Naruto's base, Naruto and Gaara both sat side by side calmly as they stared out at the scene in front of them, one of the two in a meditative seated position to feel the area around him more clearly. So you did this? That's really good work, Gaara. Naruto commented in an impressed manner. It looks nice. Maybe we could throw in some grass and trees around here too once I find some. I was tired of the arid appearance of this training ground. Gaara replied matter-of-factly, which sounded rather weird given who he was and where he came from, and it wasn't that hard either. All I had to do was make a massive hole and then fill it with water. He shrugged his shoulders. By the way, your water bill is going to be murderous at the end of the month. Naruto let out a noise of indifference, and that is why I keep so much money all the time, so that I can do stuff like this and get away with it whenever I want. He said, gesturing to the lake directly in front of them. A nod came from his sand-manipulating ally in agreement. Gaara could have just told Naruto what he was doing and he probably could have let him fill it himself, but even though he'd never say it out loud, Gaara probably had fun finding whatever way he could to waste Naruto's cash on something trivial. Well, it wasn't really trivial. Aside from being aesthetically pleasing, it also served an actual purpose as Tatsuki ran for dear life on the surface of the lake, trench knives in hand. She's really getting this down very quickly, Gaara said, impressed with Tatsuki's progress. When he thought about it though, it kind of made sense. A genin was kept busy with teamwork drills, basic training, and missions so that they only really got hands-on upper-level training when they showed potential of achieving such. Seeing as how all Tatsuki had to do was school and training, she didn't have any of the other things getting in her way. By the middle part of her second day after being introduced to it, she got wall walking down enough to get her knives out of the wall. By then Gaara had gotten bored with the scenery in the basement and had made this lake, thus Naruto moved right to the second operational purpose of using her chakra, teaching her to waterwalk. Naruto wanted to ask Gaara how the hell he managed to fill it so quickly, but then realized he was probably better off not knowing. He also figured that he needed to check the plumbing all over the office later. Or call Urahara and ask him since he probably had something to do with it anyway. Tatsuki-chan. Naruto yelled out to the girl running away on the surface of the water, stop running and fight him. Tatsuki turned towards her blonde teacher and glared at him, you fight him. She shouted back before getting her trench knives up to block a strike from a triple-bladed scythe that knocked her sliding on her heels back across the surface of the water. She looked at the smirking Haiden who was standing on the lake as well, twirling his scythe showingly. Gur. I'm going to lop your head off. She shouted as she ran towards him intent on attacking. That's the spirit. Haiden taunted, lifting his scythe to block the teenage girl's angry strikes. Fight me like you want to end me. Get used to aiming to maim, scar, and kill. Come on. No matter what you do, I can take it. He yelled maniacally as the sparks flew from Tatsuki's trench knives clashing with the pole and blades of his scythe. She was way stronger when she was angry, and Uzumaki said that there weren't any humans around that could use chakra like the old days anymore. My ass, there aren't. This girl's something else altogether. He didn't know what it was, but the way she adjusted to the way of fighting that she needed to learn very quickly impressed Naruto, Gaara, and Haiden as well. Naruto admitted that it was like watching Ichigo fight Zangetsu to get his Bankai only more drawn out. Though he never said this to her directly, nor did anyone else, it was weird to watch her get stronger by leaps and bounds over the course of a few weeks. None of them knew what it was that was pushing her forward. No one was supposed to get better like this. It was clear that the girl was no stranger to a fight at least. That was good, because they didn't need to teach her the basics of how to face down an enemy. She didn't need to learn the nuances of how battles usually escalated or little ins and outs that only a person that had been in combat could pick up on. She needed to learn how to bring that over from a sparring mindset to an environment where she and her opponents were truly out for blood, but that was something that could easily be achieved by fighting the only one of them that definitely couldn't die no matter what, Haiden while in his Jigai form. It also served the purpose of giving her human-like targets, much like what Aizen's army would look like. I don't get it, Gaara. Naruto said in confusion as he began paying rapt attention to what was going on in front of them. I understand the knowing how to defend herself, the taking all of this chakra, and Shinigami, and hollow stuff in stride. Why is she getting this good so fast? His voice really reflected his thoughts on the matter. Yoruichi says it's like Ichigo and his Shinigami powers, or Chad and an Orihime with theirs, but it shouldn't be, right? I mean, you shouldn't just get a massive jump in skill so fast no matter what, should you? Gaara let out a grunt, signifying that he was thinking, I understand your initial concern. But remember, this has been explained to us already. Tatsuki's repeated interaction with Kurosaki Ichigo and his massive amount of uncontrollable Ryuryoku wound up warping the environment around him, and her along with it. Naruto interjected abruptly, cutting off Gaara's more or less textbook explanation for what was happening, getting Gaara to turn his rather emotionless stare on Naruto, who didn't look back over at him lest he find himself unnerved by the former Kazekage. Yeah, I know that. I sat through the same speech from Urahara you did. But even so, it still shouldn't be this easy. Well, think of it this way. Gaara tried to reason. She already knew how to fight, and fight at a high level. From what we've heard and seen firsthand, that means that her physical energy was at peak form and she knew what to do with it. All you did once Kurosaki got her spiritual energy to match it was teach her how to access the combination of both, i.e. chakra. Naruto still didn't bother looking at Gaara, still choosing to look out at the lake instead. Yeah? Well, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about that. He said, pointing his finger out at Tatsuki, who dodged a swipe of Heiden's scythe with a nasty little combination of Bunshin and Kawarimi no Jutsu to attack him from behind. She shouldn't be fast enough where a substitution like that was enough to let her get the drop on Heiden. Gaara still didn't see the big deal. As far as he was concerned, it was just a fantastic use of misdirection, the point of the jutsu in the first place. He spoke up as he watched Heiden block and then kick her away stiffly, forcing her to skip across the water like a stone before sinking under. It doesn't look like she got the drop on anything to me. Do you even know how fast she really was in the first place? And even if she wasn't that fast, remember that you would have been judging that off of your standards. Naruto conceded the point and nodded stiffly. That was really good though. I liked it. He said in reference to Tatsuki's performance as he stood up and walked out onto the lake to relieve her. Okay, thanks for going easy today, Heiden. He said to the silver-haired man. Heiden just looked at him olishly before grinning sheepishly. Well damn Uzumaki, I forgot all about that like 10 minutes into the fight. He then saw Naruto's eyes widen. Heh, yeah. Some of those times I was really swinging to disembowel. My bad. She was just lucky he stayed in his jigai if that was the case. Naruto just pointed to the shore where Gaara was, basically telling him to get off of the lake. You're not fighting Tatsuki anymore. Not for a long time. However, that just made what she had done all the more impressive. That entire sequence of combat had lasted around 45 minutes. Scoffing to himself as if it wasn't a big loss at all, Heiden flippantly went to shore. Fine, you're acting like I can't just rip a hole straight to Hueco Mundo when I want to kill something. As he reached land and started walking towards the stairs to head upstairs, he chimed in with something else. By the way, you're a crappy teacher anyway, she only cut me one time. Naruto rolled his eyes and turned his attention to Tatsuki pulling herself out of the water and lying down on her back at the side of the lake. She turned her head towards him and coughed out some water. Heiden's an asshole. Yeah. Naruto said in agreement as he took a seat on the ground next to her, but tell me that fighting him isn't helping though. Tatsuki sat up and shook her head, telling him that she could see how it was helping her. You're really getting things down fast. It took me 4 months to get through surface walking and water walking after I became a ninja. He didn't tell her the other extenuating circumstances for that because after being kicked around for most of an hour she didn't need to know that her free time was a big reason that she was moving along so quickly. The focus and dedication was very much appreciated though. She was definitely taking the whole thing seriously, even before he sicked Heiden on her and basically made her survive. I practice at home too. Tatsuki admitted, frowning at the fact that she was utterly drenched from falling into the lake during the fight with Heiden time and time again. It was understandable that she could do that too. All she had learned were the basics, none of which were destructive, loud, attention-attracting, or anything like that. There was no reason at all that she couldn't take her training into her own hands away from the office. Is that bad? She asked after not getting a response from Naruto at first. Without looking at her, he shook his head. When I was a kid there wasn't anything wrong with being able to do things like we can do. That was a long time ago though, and now who knows what people would do if they knew? You can practice on your own. I'm happy that you do. Just make sure that nobody knows you can do this stuff, especially when you start learning the more destructive stuff. At the mere mention of destructive stuff, Tatsuki's eyes let off a nearly unnoticeable shine as she looked over into her teacher's face. Now by destructive stuff you mean some of the things that I've seen you do when you and Gaara fight? Or some of the stuff I see you do when you and Yoruichi fight? Naruto looked at her and raised an eyebrow before turning his head to look back out at the lake. Oh hell no. Most of the stuff I can do takes tons of power that I don't think you have, and I don't really think I've even busted out the big guns in front of you yet. I don't want to destroy parts of Karakura Town, or get you killed trying to use any of my moves. He noticed Tatsuki frown and start to grumble and spoke again. I didn't say I wasn't going to teach you anything though. Since I can't teach you my first real ninjutsu without probably killing you out of negligence or the next thing on the list in my repertoire without trusting you more, I'll skip to the next thing. Next thing? Tatsuki said questioningly. What next thing is that? In response, Naruto held up his right hand, forming a spinning blue orb of chakra in it. Tatsuki thought that it was very pretty, but other than being a way of showing off visible chakra, she didn't see what the big deal about it was. Naruto picked up on this. You've never seen me use this, have you? Tatsuki shook her head saying that she indeed had not. Well, just so you know, we're skipping straight from the D rank techniques to the A rank. Tatsuki still looked at the orb of chakra skeptically. What's so A rank about this? Her answer came when Naruto slammed the orb down on the ground between them, throwing up debris and cratering the ground where it hit. And this made Tatsuki desperately want to learn this ninjutsu. And this is called? She asked, a more enthusiastic tone in her voice. Rasengan, spiraling sphere. Naruto informed her, pleased that she was impressed with the jutsu. It's not only as strong as you can see right here, but for those of us with what I like to call stupid hands, you don't need to know any hand seals to use it. This was kind of a boon for me when I was younger because I was terrible at using hand seals. I still kind of suck at it, and most of my jutsu don't really use many of them, if any at all. And Tatsuki honestly hated hand seals. She liked keeping her hands in fists so that she could fight. Letting her guard down to make a bunshin or even to prepare a kawarimi went against everything she knew about keeping up a guard. Having a jutsu ready that she only needed to charge the chakra for was exactly what she wanted, and having one that actually did something offensive was even more appealing. Excitedly jumping to her feet with a grin on her face, Tatsuki looked ready for more work, impressive again due to having had fought Haiden for most of the hour prior. Alright then, sounds good to me. So what's first? First. Naruto commented, still not looking at her, which confused her since he had only looked at her once and had made a concerted effort to keep from doing so again ever since then. You're going to go get dry and change clothes because I can see through them. Tatsuki blushed and looked at herself, noticing this fact. Gaara's been staring at you for the last few minutes. Tatsuki turned to look across the lake after Naruto's accusation of Gaara only to find sand blowing where he had just been sitting. Growling to herself about her drenched state, Tatsuki started walking off, stomping on the surface of the water, cursing out Haiden as she was set on heading upstairs and getting herself together again. That's surprising. Naruto put a smile on his face as he heard Yoruchi's voice from behind him. I fully expected you to be gawking at Tatsuki the entire time. You would have been staring at me like you had X-ray vision if I had been the one all wet. Naruto stood up and turned around to face the former Shinigami captain. She's too young, you know that. He remarked, getting a roll of golden eyes from Yoruchi. Even comparing their ages was like comparing a garden pond to a landmark lake. I feel strange enough with the relationship that you and I have. I can't just go around ogling high school girls. Especially ones that he knew, at least when they knew that he was watching them. I'm a responsible sensei, Yoruchi-chan. Yeah, sure, whatever. Yoruchi said dryly before getting to the heart of the matter she had come to see him for. Kisuke's got the portal set to leave for tomorrow. And as a bonus, they know we're coming this time, so no dealing with a veritable army of Shinigami again. She sounded rather cheerful at that before taking on a pointed look. Who's in charge while we're gone? Oh, Gaara for sure. Naruto replied without missing a beat, taking note of the satisfied look on his second-in-command's face. What's with that look? It's Gaara or Haiden, and I don't even trust Haiden not to disembowel Tatsuki during a spar anymore, let alone keep everyone else alive until we get back. I'm not even taking the whole former Kage thing into account yet, but that's another point even if you don't get the reference. Yoruchi got behind Naruto and jumped on his back. So we're good to go, right? She asked as he began walking back towards the stairs to go upstairs. We can just head out first thing tomorrow and that'll be that? Sounds good to me. Naruto said with a grin on his face. He sure as hell didn't want to go to school again either. This was a great excuse to not do so. A business trip sounds great. I need to check on my account in the Soul Society anyway. XXX. The next day, Karakura High School. Kan, in Ichigo's body, eyed the empty seat nearby that had been more or less designated as Uzumaki Naruto's seat. While he didn't know too much about the guy personally, at least not as much as he knew about Ichigo's other friends, he did know that the reason he was currently in Ichigo's body living his life in the original stead was because Naruto had said or done something that had resulted in Ichigo taking on his Shinigami form for an extended period of time. He also didn't really have the time to ask Ichigo's other friends about where he just so happened to be, or why they weren't there with him. Whenever school ended, they would all usually head off almost immediately to do whatever it was that they did. It wasn't anything like going home since he knew where they lived, and the ways that they took certainly weren't to their homes. It was all very suspicious to him. Man, no one tells me anything. Khan thought as he looked over the entire classroom in boredom. Even Ichigo didn't divulge where he was going or what he was doing before he left Khan his body. He'd better at least be doing something productive. XXX. Vizard's hideout, training ground. 2 barriers around the outside of the warehouse, 1 barrier around the majority of the training ground itself beneath the warehouse. This was all required so that Ichigo's Ryatsu did not leak out and alert absolutely everyone and everything that could sense even the slightest amount of it to his presence or current existence. There was a very good reason to hide the latter at the moment. Staring inside of the barrier set inside of the training ground at all of the dust and debris in the air, Shinji let out a groan of exasperation. He's going to break that Bakudu, isn't he? He asked as if he already knew the answer, looking towards Hachi who seemed to be struggling to maintain it. Yes, it looks like it. The gigantic man said in a reserved, polite manner. I don't believe it will hold for too much longer. Fantastic. Shinji said sarcastically before turning to the other Vizards in the room. Okay, who's going in first to hold that thing back? All fingers flew towards him, getting his jaw to drop. Hey, just why should I go first? I'm the leader here. Lisa was the first to respond to his question. Well, if you're the leader, then lead by example and show us how to handle things. She said nonchalantly. You've all done this before. You know how to do it. Shinji shouted in reply before calming down and turning towards the barrier, scratching his head. Well, someone needs to get in there, and I mean now. Hiyori stood up and stomped over to the barrier in a huff. Fine. I'll go first. There's no way that dumbass bastard could be that tough. Hachi, open the barrier for me. She snapped, getting a small opening in the barrier made for her to enter, allowing her to feel the Ryatsu leaking out that took her slightly aback before she quickly pulled herself together. So he's got some power, no big deal. She said as she stepped inside and allowed the barrier to wreck loose. The dust enshrouding the inside of the barrier cleared to reveal a white, muscular, humanoid lizard complete with black markings, a long thick tail, spikes protruding from its shoulders, and 3 toes. It had a skull mask on its face, long orange hair, the tattered remnants of a Shinigami hakama around its waist and legs, and most importantly, Zangetsu in its right hand. Outside of the barrier, Love, not looking at a manga to pass time due to the seriousness of this event, looked at the scene inside of it and remarked, do you think we should have made Naruto come down here and do this? It's kind of his fault that we skipped to this part so soon. I don't think that's appropriate in this case. Rose said, focusing intently on Ichigo in his hollow form. We told him to bring Ichigo to us but didn't tell him much more about how exactly we were going to help him control his powers. If he sped things along with his words, then that was probably because he didn't know about this part of the training. From inside the barrier, the fight had started between Hiyori and Hollow Ichigo, tearing up a lot of the landscape within right off the bat. Kensei had a frown on his face, but that was usual. I say if anyone pays for this crap, it should be Urahara. It's really his fault that this happened in the first place. XXX. Urahara shop, training ground. Achoo! Urahara wiped his nose following his sudden sneeze. Ugh, I hope that was some beautiful lady talking about me just now. He said to himself before turning to Naruto and Yoruichi. So it's just you two going? He asked. Dressed in his red sage coat and corresponding gear, Naruto nodded before shrugging. Who else would go? Everyone else that could go is busy, and I can't take Haiden or Gaara because that would start something we probably wouldn't be able to explain or finish. Besides, Yoruichi added on, this is going to require a diplomatic touch. She jerked her thumb towards Naruto. I shouldn't even be taking him for this. Gaara's more diplomatic than he is. She ignored the deadpan look coming from her blonde companion, but he's the one that's supposed to be heading this whole thing up, so if he didn't go, something would seem off. Do you know how many years I've wanted a position of leadership? Naruto asked Yoruichi. I've wanted to do stuff like this since I was a kid. There's no way I'm screwing this up. Everyone will know we're legit after this is over with. Urahara smirked as he walked over to Tessai to begin the opening of the portal. So what exactly are we called then? He asked. I mean, we're not the Godai 13, so you can't just tack a number onto the end of a squad. As he made his way to the outline of the portal, he noticed that Naruto hadn't answered yet. You don't know what we're supposed to be called yet, do you? He asked amusedly as the portal opened. I'll be sure to work on that. Naruto replied dryly before turning to Yoruchi. Are we going to get chased by that Katatsu thing that came after us the last time? No. They probably turned it off since they know we're coming. Yoruchi said as she walked towards the open portal, but even if we did get chased, you can outrun it, right? She then jumped through and began heading towards the Soul Society. Naruto sighed and shook his head before addressing Urahara and Tessai. What you told me about Nell, do you know what you're going to do to help her? Nope. Urahara said brightly, getting a deep frown out of Naruto. Don't look so worried about it. She'll be fine staying here with her brothers until I come up with something. It might not be as hard as we think it will be. Maybe. Things had been going way too well for them anyway. That was the best they were going to get for the time being, it appeared, so Naruto accepted that. Alright. I'm counting on you, Urahara. Earn that paycheck. He said as he jumped into the portal and left the world of the living. You pay everyone in cash though. Urahara shouted after him before deactivating the portal. Once the Senkaman faded, he looked at Tessai. Well, let's get back to work, shall we? Figuring out how to stop that leak of spiritual energy from Little Nell's mask. I have an idea if I could suggest it. Tessai stated as they started to leave the room, though I am not sure of just what extent such a course of action would manage to fix or if the person we need for my idea is skilled enough for it. The look on Urahara's face under his bucket hat showed that he was paying attention. XXX. Soul Society, West Rukongai 1st District. Took you long enough. Yoruchi chimed from her seat on a rooftop as Naruto walked down through the streets, probably searching for her. Did you get tripped up in the tunnel, sweetie? She asked in a teasing manner. Naruto gave a sarcastic laugh up at the dark-skinned female Shinigami. I didn't know we were running. And I thought that we were supposed to be diplomatic about this whole thing. Doesn't that mean we're supposed to be serious? Yoruchi nodded and pointed off in the direction of the Siriidii. Yeah, but we're not there yet. I don't have to act all uptight until I walk through those gates. Then I can let out the Shihuin Yoruchi that was the 22nd head of my clan, captain of the 2nd division, and the leader of the Onmatsukado, and you can let out whatever serious part of Uzumaki Naruto exists. She jumped down from where she had been sitting on the roof and landed in front of Naruto. So what's the plan, boss man? How are you going to get us sanctioned by the Godai 13? I couldn't give a fuck less if we were sanctioned by the Godai 13, Yoruchi-chan. And to hell with that 10-year trial period the old man was talking about back when the idea was first planted in my head. Naruto said, getting a confused look out of Yoruchi. We're not meant to be an actual working part of the Siriidii. We're meant to operate outside of it, to handle the things that we think should be taken care of. If we wind up being one of them, then what exactly makes us different from any other little division of the Godai 13 or any other part of the Siriidii? She started to get it. Yoruchi understood what Naruto was doing here. If he wasn't lobbying for a position as a sanctioned faction of the Siriidii, you just want to let them know that the way you're doing this is working. Without you going through their usual channels of protocol, we can get things moving way faster than they can. That's it. Naruto confirmed for her. We're just here to tell them what we found out that Jubachi didn't tell them because she left. Let the old man Yamamoto know that we're willing to help, and we'll even do this Aizen stuff for free because it needs to be done, but we need to get paid if they want our help later. That's how things are going to go. If people want our help and know how to find us, and can pay us, then we'll go ahead and work for them. Guns for hire? Yoruchi said, liking the sound of working at her own pace and schedule. So that's your vision of what you want for us? My vision? Naruto remarked derisively. What do you know about my vision? My vision would turn your world upside down, tear asunder your illusions and send the sanctuary of your own true ignorance crashing down around you. Now ask yourself, are you really ready to see that vision? He asked, bringing them to a halt to stare intently at her. Yoruchi just looked at him owlishly and shrugged her shoulders. I don't know. Probably. The serious stare from Naruto dropped and he grinned at her sheepishly as they started walking again. Heh, I was just joking anyway, kind of. What's up, Jaiden boy? He greeted the massive gate guardian that had lifted the door for them to enter the Siriidii. Jaidenbu could only wave one hand as the other held up the gate on his shoulders as he had heard what Naruto had said and didn't exactly know how to receive that last comment. Jidenbu started to say once he allowed the gates of the Siriidii to lower again. I was told to inform you both upon your arrival that you are to head towards the 1st Division barracks at the earliest possible time to speak with Yamamoto Soteishu. Well, isn't that convenient? Yoruichi said cheerfully, rapping Naruto on the shoulder, and to think, we were headed that way right now. That's a long way to go though. She then got a sly smile on her face before asking him a question, so Naruto, do you want to play a game? There went that damn smile that Naruto damn well despised. It either meant something cool was about to happen, or something was about to piss him off, and since it was still daylight out it wasn't going to be the cool thing. What game? Naruto asked her despite himself. And his answer came when Yoruichi suddenly blurred out of his sight and he felt a presence on his back. Just a little game of tag. Yoruichi said in his ear quietly. When he reached to grab a hold of her he let off a scoff due to it being an afterimage. Growling to himself as he could just hear her laughing on the wind, Naruto turned to Jidenbu who gave him a silent thumbs up. Well, at least trying to catch Yoruichi would make an otherwise cumbersome trip all the way across the Siriidii much more lively. He might as well enjoy it either way. Naruto jumped up on one of the high walls lining the streets of the Siriidii and cupped his hands around his mouth. You'd better be headed straight to the 1st Division Yoruichi-chan because your ass is mine, Databeo. He shouted. Ah, Databeo. I still love that. He heard Yoruichi shout with some humor in her voice, getting Naruto's eye to twitch before he took off in a blur in search of her. XXX. Karakura Town. So, Tatsuki said, trench knives in hand as she stood in her fighting stance in a park, you guys are sure I have to do this? She asked rather tentatively as she gripped her weapons tightly. Standing a distance away from her was a gray scorpion-like hollow with a saber-tooth mask skittering around an empty playground. Her last run-in with a hollow wasn't exactly pleasant. One didn't necessarily enjoy getting their body taken over by a giant octopus monster. Nearby, Chad nodded to her question. You have to know that you're able to fight a hollow and win, Tatsuki, at least fight well enough to defend yourself. Nothing bad will happen as long as we're here. We were asked to come with you for that reason. If things got bad they were more than capable of stepping in to ensure Tatsuki's safety. Orihime was much more enthusiastic with her reinforcement. You can do it, Tatsuki-chan. Show that hollow what you've got. Give it that new move that you said Naruto taught you. I didn't even learn it yet. Tatsuki snapped before turning her attention to the hollow that had stopped puttering about and had now locked eyes with her, freezing both of them in place. Any advice, anyone? Tatsuki asked quietly, waiting out the hollow's first move. Yuryu was the only one to chime in with anything on that front. Aim for the mask if you want to get rid of it quickly. It'll regenerate attacks that aren't particularly fatal. He wished he could do something to fight if push came to shove, but he still didn't have his powers back, hence he was only an informed spectator in this instance, and don't wait for it to attack first. Why? Tatsuki asked, turning to look at Yuryu and wonder why he was giving her that kind of advice. Wasn't it better to react to an enemy than to rush in blindly with no information on how your adversary worked? Yuryu just pointed at the scorpion-looking hollow as he replied, that's why. Tatsuki turned her attention back to the hollow and found that it had spat a rather lengthy spine at Tatsuki, forcing her to jump out of the way as it impaled a tree. She then watched the tree wither and die within seconds of being stabbed through by the hollow's attack. What the hell? Tatsuki shouted loudly, scorpions don't do that. It's a scorpion hollow. Yuryu supplied helpfully, tilting his glasses up onto his face and getting nods of agreement from Chad and Orihime. You're not helping, jerk. Tatsuki shouted before turning her attention back to the hollow as it roared loudly. Okay, just pretend that this is dodging practice all over again, only if I screw up I die. It sounded simple, except for the dying part. That part sounded painful. The hollow let out another roar as it basically charged Tatsuki, snapping its front claws as it advanced. As it got close, Tatsuki dodged a snap of each claw before dodging its back stinger as it missed her and stabbed into the ground, killing the grass within a 5-foot radius with the poison it had injected it with. Tatsuki backed off and made 3 hand seals before a quartet of Tatsukis appeared around the hollow and began circling it rapidly in an attempt to disorient it. As it spun around trying to guess which Tatsuki was real, it started taking slashes and punch mark puncture wounds in its blind spots. Eventually it got sick of getting hit and regenerating its wounds and used its tail to bat all of Tatsuki's clones out of existence. After getting rid of the clones, the hollow looked around for the now absent Tatsuki as it hadn't hit anything solid when it rid itself of the multitude of Bunshin. Ha! Tatsuki then dropped a crushing falling heel kick across the back of the hollow, getting a hiss of pain from the massive monster as its legs nearly crumbled from the pressure of the attack. Almost, because it was still tough enough to stay upright. Oh come on. That should have broken you in half. She mumbled to herself before she saw the tail swing about overhead. Crap. The tail stabbed downward while Tatsuki was still in the middle of kneeling from her heel drop. Tatsuki lifted and crossed her trench knives in an effort to block, keeping the tail from stabbing into her. However, the force behind the stab knocked her off of the hollow's back to the ground. Tatsuki groaned at being knocked down and disoriented before getting her bearings back in time to roll out of the way of another stab from the hollow. After dodging a series of rapid-fire stabs, Tatsuki got back to her feet and directly punched at the tail when it came her way again, knocking it back with surprising strength. She hit the tail so hard that the hollow wasn't prepared for it and wound up being knocked back on its back legs, leaving its underbelly exposed. Tatsuki smirked at the opening left for her and rushed towards the hollow before giving off a loud yell of exertion and delivering a hard flying kick right to the underbelly of the scorpion hollow, knocking it onto its back. Finish it off already. Yuryu said in a bored voice. I'm getting to it. Tatsuki snapped back as she ran at the hollow that had managed to get itself upright, just in time for her to punch it directly in the mask, where she began unleashing a combination of punches with her trench knives that made the hollow backpedal due to the impact, but did nothing otherwise. I can't break the mask with just my punches. Orihime saw the hollow stumble and scuttle back to get some distance before opening its mouth once more. Tatsuki-chan, look out. She shouted in warning, preparing to intervene with her Shun Rika if the need arose. The hollow fired a large spire into the air that exploded and started dropping spines all over the ground in something of a scatter shot. Tatsuki dodged and made liberal use of Kawarimi with spines that had already stabbed themselves into the ground as she drew closer to the hollow that seemed frozen in place. She clenched her fists and looked down at her weapons. I don't have an attack jutsu, but I do have these. I think Naruto-sensei said that channeling chakra to these things did something. I don't remember, he said it in passing, that we'd get to it later. Well, she didn't have anything to lose at this point other than her life, and if she didn't come up with a way to end the fight, she might just lose that anyway. Tatsuki guided chakra to her fists and by proxy her trench knives and ran forward at the prone hollow. Apparently that last fire and forget attack came with some kind of recoil with it because it still hadn't moved yet. She cocked one hand back and unleashed a punch as hard as she could, right at the mask of the hollow as if it were a board she needed to break. Her bladed fist impacted right off of the mask, cracking it harshly with a blue ripple rolling through the cracks, momentary remnants of her chakra as blood flew from it. Surprised by the amount of damage that one punch dealt, Tatsuki stood in awe, fist still outstretched. Tatsuki! Chad yelled across the park to her, it's not finished yet. Don't stop. That snapped her focus back and she drew her other fist back, generating chakra through it before unleashing her second punch that destroyed the mask and by proxy the hollow along with it. As the hollow dispersed into spiritual particles, Tatsuki just blinked repeatedly as her adrenaline died down. She looked down at her fists before a grin stretched out over her face. Hell yeah. I did it. Stupid hollows better think twice before they mess with Arisawa Tatsuki. She then collapsed and sat down on the ground, breathing heavily. Orihime ran over and gave her best friend a huge hug. That was so great, Tatsuki. Your first fight with a hollow and you didn't even get hurt. She was ecstatic that Tatsuki didn't require any healing. She looked at Chad and Yuryu. Wasn't that great? Chad had a small smile on his face. At least you didn't pass out afterwards like I did. He commented. You could have finished a bit faster, you looked lost for a lot of that fight. Yuryu critiqued, getting the middle finger from Tatsuki in return. It's just an opinion. He grumbled under his breath quietly, when you were hitting the hollow solidly in the mask the first time, why didn't that finish it? The second time you attacked like that it did. Taking a moment from her little victory lap, Tatsuki looked at her trench knives to explain, well, the first time I didn't generate any chakra through the knives. Without chakra I couldn't punch through the mask, but I thought Naruto-sensei said that using chakra would make me cut through anything I hit, like that other guy he talked about that had these before me. All I did was just hit harder. She said as if she were actually disappointed that her punches were now stronger. Oh well, it was another question to ask once he came back from wherever he was. Maybe she was just doing it wrong? It didn't feel like it though. Orihime helped Tatsuki back to her feet. So are you ready for another one? She asked, in high spirits now that she knew Tatsuki could beat a hollow. Tatsuki's face froze in a smile that actually belied her trepidation. Another one? She said in a rather tentative manner, you mean there are more? Yuryu nodded slowly, there are usually always more somewhere, and since Ichigo is off doing whatever it is he's doing, someone has to deal with them. He left out the fact that he really couldn't do much without his powers. Man, it kept coming back to that. He needed something to fix that little issue and in a hurry. Having his Ryuryoku sealed off after his fights in the Soul Society was really a pain. He was all but useless the way he was. And that someone is us? Tatsuki asked, pointing between the three of them. Wait, doesn't that Siriidii place send Shinigami to do this crap for us? Chad nodded. Well yeah, but they usually leave the world of the living alone for the most part. Since we get a lot of trouble they sent one guy with an afro, but he kind of sucks. Yuryu finished for Chad, who was too nice to just flat out shoot the guy down. He isn't going to be able to get them all if a massive outbreak occurs, not even close. And that's where we come in. Not to mention the fact that there was a standing bounty for hollows defeated in Karakura town for anyone in the little group of the spiritually aware. Apparently Naruto did have rather deep pockets since he was footing the bill. Tatsuki raised her hand. I kind of suck, so wouldn't I be better served to go back to the base, or better yet, home? She could keep fighting these hollows, but these hollows weren't as strong as those Arrancar girls she got into a tiff with previously. She hadn't even cracked Naruto's directions for the Rasengan yet, so there was no telling how long it would take her to learn that, and she didn't think fighting hollows would help her get it down anyway. Her answer came when Orihime grabbed a hold of her hand and started running off, probably towards the location of the next hollow to face. Come on Tatsuki-chan. Kurosaki-kun is busy, so it's up to us. What the hell could Ichigo be doing that's so important? Tatsuki asked belligerently as everyone started heading off to hunt for hollows. XXX. Vizard's hideout, training ground. I'm tagging out. A rather disheveled-looking Rose said, his long blonde hair all out of sorts as he stepped out of the barrier enclosing Hollow Ichigo to take a seat next to the other amassed Vizards that had also been taking turns fighting with Ichigo. As no one immediately jumped up to take his place, he spoke up again. Hey, I was just in there for the last 2 hours, someone else go in there. Kensei stood up with a sigh and punched his right fist into his palm. Fine. I'll smack the kid around for a bit longer. The silver-haired man said as the barrier opened for him to enter from. How long are you going to take to beat your inner hollow's ass? You're taking longer than Hiyori did. He taunted. Hiyori took offense to being used in an insult. Hey, less talking about me, more beating the crap out of dumbass over there. Ichigo let out a roar of a monstrous voice with tinges of his own original voice in it. Kensei drew his Zanpakuto and rolled his eyes. Yeah, whatever. I've got something for you ugly. Futabase, Tachikes, blow it away, earth-severing wind. Currents of air whirled around Kensei before it dissipated and revealed that his Zanpakuto had transformed into a combat knife with a ring on the gray hilt. He flipped the weapon in his hand and held it in a backwards grip. Seeing his Shurikai, Mashiro yelled out to him, Hey Kensei. Are you going to use your Kamehameha wave? She asked rather innocently. Kensei turned towards her with a twitching eye as he gnashed his teeth. For the last fucking time, Mashiro? That is not what it's called. It doesn't even have a name. You know it doesn't have a name. It's just an attack. Right. Mashiro replied cheerfully, so I'm naming it for you, and I'm just telling you what it looks like. It's not my fault you ripped it off from Dragon Ball. I've been using that attack for more than 100 goddamn years. You were my lieutenant, you should know that. How can you say I ripped it off from anything, especially some dumb manga? Kensei snapped at her irritably. Hey! Love, Lisa, and Rose all said simultaneously in insulted tones of voice. Love pointed directly at Kensei in a dramatic manner. The life lessons taught in that manga were passed down to an entire generation of young boys that grew up to run the world of the living today. Kensei let out an indignant snort. Yeah, that's why the world of the living today absolutely sucks. Lisa crossed her arms over her chest and glared. Thou shalt not belittle or slight the adventures of Son Goku or his band of Dragon Ball hunting warriors. That's why I hope Ichigo blows you away like he looks like he's going to, she said, informing Kensei of his impending doom. Huh? Kensei turned around to find Ichigo charging a Zero at the tip of his claws on one hand. Oh crap. Kensei said with trepidation as he hurriedly drew his hands together over his Zanpakuto grip and generated a ball of energy in hands, pumping it backwards to centralize the power before thrusting his hands forward and firing off a white energy blast that matched Ichigo's Zero. The red Zero and the white blast of Kensei's energy beam clashed together in a stalemate, pushing against one another until Kensei's mask appeared on his face in the appearance of a flat hockey face guard with 3 bands that went around the back of his head. Kensei shouted in a distorted voice as his attack began to overpower Ichigo's and send the possessed substitute Shinigami back with the blast that pulverized rock and everything else that got in its way. Kensei let his mask fade from view and smirked to himself in a satisfied manner. "Don't try to sneak up on me, kid, you're a few years too early to try something like that." "Yeah." Kensei with the Kamehameha for the win. "God damn it, that's not what it's called." Kensei snapped at Mashiro again, only to get her pointing behind him in response. "Really? He's back up already?" He turned his head to talk some more smack to Hollow Ichigo. "You'd think you dashed." That was as far as he got before Ichigo's tail forcefully smashed him through a nearby rock. "Ooh!" all of the Vizards said from their position as spectators as they cringed along with the hit. Mashiro then shook her head pitifully. "Poor Kensei, he should have used instant transmission." "Shut up!" Kensei yelled as he started freeing himself from the rubble. Once he got back to his feet and wiped the blood from his face, Ichigo roared at him and Kensei angrily yelled back at him before the two charged each other to continue fighting. XXX. Siriidii, 1st Division Barracks. Yamamoto looked out at Naruto and Yaruchi, standing out in front of him in the assembly room. At the moment, all of the other captains of the Godii 13 were in attendance as well for the meeting. The captain of the 2nd Division, Soifan, has given me the briefing of your actions in exploring Hueco Mundo. The old captain commander had his eyes closed as he spoke. "The most important thing I've taken from what I've been told is that you can form a stable connection to Hueco Mundo anytime you wish to do so and then make it so that you can return." "That's right," Naruto said, confirming Soifan's earlier debriefing to Yamamoto after her return from her mission to the world of the living, "but I would rather not use my powers like that for no good reason." This was him being completely honest. Some things that I'm capable of just aren't meant to be done on demand. Seeing himself as a true sage, Naruto took his role as the bridge between the physical and spiritual world rather seriously. He had ever since he had found that he was able to see roaming spirits. He wasn't about to use the Gedu to jettison entire groups of Shinigami into Hueco Mundo to launch guerrilla attacks. They wouldn't stop at just fighting Aizen's army, they would exterminate every Hollow or Arrancar they saw. And from Naruto's experience with Nel, Pesh, Dondo Chaka, and Gaara, he knew that there were those that roamed Hueco Mundo that weren't inherently evil. He left Haiden out of this group for obvious reasons. He was alright with dealing only with Hollows that roamed into the human world or the Soul Society to devour souls since there was no need for them to be there otherwise. Yamamoto let out a pondering thought. "I surmise that mere monetary compensation would not be enough for me to barter passage for my forces to Hueco Mundo." Naruto shook his head with a frown on his face. "Sorry, but no. I understand that there's a war brewing and I'll do what I can to stop that or help you out, especially since you're actually commissioning us for help for pay, but I won't just send Shinigami there for the sake of it." He pointed at Kenpachi, like say I let him go just for the hell of it. "What do you think he'd do?" Kenpachi grinned at the prospect of being left to himself in Hueco Mundo, thus emphasizing Naruto's point. Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. "While keeping the bloodshed to a minimum is understandable, a Shinigami Zanpakuto purifies the hollow soul so that they may pass over to the Soul Society as pluses, peaceful souls. If we were to send our Shinigami in to hunt for hollows, it would be more of a good thing than a bad thing in any view." Hearing that all hollows were evil again made Naruto think of the ones that he had been acquainted with, and how scared Nell seemed when she had first met him and realized that Soifan, Nimue, and Omida were Shinigami. "I'll say it again, I'm a sage. I hate killing, but sometimes it needs to be done. I cherish all sorts of existence, all forms of life and even souls. This isn't as black and white as you like to make it look. I'm not going to just start slaughtering hollows for no reason." He wasn't about to directly start a genocide of any kind. If Naruto didn't want to open the Gedu, then not even the use of force would compel him to. He seemed to be that sort of person, and his abilities were unable to be duplicated thus far even with the studies that had been done by Kuratsuchi. The eyes of the old warrior opened to stare at Naruto sternly. "You have principles. I respect that. However, if your principles run against the safety and protection of the Siriidii, we will have an issue with one another, Uzumaki-san. I would advise against that for your sake." Naruto just nodded. Being a smartass would help no one in this situation. He had taken the measure of an entire group of the strongest in the world dead set on ending his life back when he was young, with an entire army backing them near the end, and after experiencing that he didn't feel like provoking a similar predicament again for absolutely no reason. At this point Yoruchi stepped into the conversation. We would never attempt to harm the Siriidii or any part of the Soul Society Yamamoto Soteshu, but we reserve the right to pick and choose the assignments that we undertake. She put one hand on her hip as she kept up the serious atmosphere. We are not a part of the Soul Society or the Siriidii at all. 3 of us are exiled from here as a matter of fact. The members of our group are handpicked and recruited from our own findings, and we receive no mandatory reinforcement from the Godii 13 unless it has already been confirmed that we're to work together. You've expressed this already, Yamamoto said candidly. He didn't want to let it be known, but both of the guests of the Godii 13 probably already knew. Having a rogue contingent aware and able to openly meddle with affairs of both the spiritual and living worlds didn't sit well with him. Especially with such formerly high-profile members such as Shihoin Yoruchi, Urahara Kasuke, and Tsukabashi Tessai in its ranks, all important figures in the Siriidii prior to their exile. Still, they had done nothing wrong as far as he had seen yet. Not even the representative Shinigami currently stationed in Karakura town in place of Kuchiki Rukia, Kurumadani Zenisuke, had come up with anything negative in his periodic reports, though he had sent back intelligence on a series of skirmishes fought in Karakura between combatants with high levels of Ryatsu, though he was unable to arrive on the scene in time to bear witness to any of the event. Yoruchi picked up where she left off before Yamamoto interjected, "Then you'll know that we're merely informing the Siriidii of our actions out of general courtesy. We intend to operate as intended regardless of your consent, seeing as how we've refrained from breaking any laws that would have any bearing over the Soul Society." Man, Yoruchi-chan in captain mode is super hot. Naruto thought to himself, though he refrained from showing this on the outside, choosing instead to put up an unyielding front of solidarity with Yoruchi. It stood to be mentioned though that game face Yoruchi was certainly asserting their point as diplomatically as possible while still expressing one very important point. The point was basically them saying, "We don't want to step on any toes or anything, and we actually want to help you, but no matter what happens here this group will not be disbanded since we haven't done anything that would make it an issue." Yukitake took this moment to ask a question. As a separate entity completely separate from the entire Soul Society, could we at least get a scope of your ranks? Maybe a short rundown of your active force? Naruto and Yoruchi both looked at each other before Naruto addressed the white-haired sickly captain. "I can't do that without compromising the security and possible safety of a few of our operatives, but I can tell you the first few members that joined. There's myself, Shihoin Yoruchi," he said, gesturing to said Shinigami woman, Urahara Kasuke, Tsukabashi Tessai. "The 2 young workers in Urahara's employ might be members one day soon, maybe, and that's all I can give you at the moment," he said, sounding apologetic as he trusted Yukitake after he had attempted to assist him against Yamamoto during the attempt to save Rukia. "I have to protect my own people first in this instance." Soifan was the only one who knew why that was really important though, and unless the topic was brought to her she wasn't about to potentially betray Yoruchi, and Uzumaki as well she guessed. If it wasn't meant to be said then she wasn't going to blurt it out, especially since it really had no bearing on the overall safety of the Siriidii, which was Yamamoto's primary concern. Still, even off of what they heard from him, that was one hell of a lineup by itself even without knowing who else the group had. 2 ex-captains and the former Kiddo Corps commander, not exactly anything to sneeze at when it came to firepower by any stretch of the imagination. At that juncture in the meeting, Shunsui decided to try and venture a question out since his best friend had just done so, though his was decidedly less serious. Not a bad thing, since the tension in the room had grown palpable by this point. "So this group that you guys are making up, do you even have a name for it, or are we just going to call you those guys?" Once again Yoruchi looked at Naruto, who rolled his eyes. She could have told them the name he came up with on the way to the 1st Division barracks just as easily as he could have. She was there and he told her what it was to keep her informed. Naruto cleared his throat before addressing the flamboyantly garbed captain and the others as well. "I guess you can call us Equilibrium," he said with a grin as he rubbed the back of his neck. The small, white spiky-haired Captain Hitsugaya Tushiro stepped forward. "So what exactly do you do? What's the point of your existence as a group?" Yoruchi answered, "To do what needs to be done." A small smile appeared on her face, for a fee more often than not. "We'll be capable of doing the things that you can't or won't. We can go everywhere, even the places that you're not able to, and get rid of the problems that you might not even know about if that's what we feel like doing." What is this, a TV commercial? Naruto thought to himself, good final cell to leave on though. He had to admit with a shake of his head, that's all we've got for you. That is, if that's all you need? He asked as he turned back towards Yamamoto, who thought for a moment before giving a nod. He wasn't going to get anything useful information-wise out of the pair as things stood. They shared all they had on Aizen and his errand car. There was nothing else urgent at the moment. If you need us, you know how to reach us, Naruto said conclusively. Yamamoto tapped his staff/Sanpakudo on the ground loudly. In that instance, the meeting is adjourned. Everyone is dismissed and allowed to go back to their usual duties. He more or less ordered as the room began to clear out of the captains and the visitors, Naruto and Yoruichi. If Shihoin Dano and Uzumaki-san would just wait for a moment, however. He finished, getting the two to stop and turn around as everyone else left. I have a request. A request? Naruto repeated with a raised eyebrow before crossing his arms over his chest. Will we be getting paid for this request? He asked pointedly before catching a sharp elbow to the side from Yoruichi. Honestly, Yoruichi thought to herself as she regained the group's poise in this situation. Naruto had tact and could orate well, but apparently his impetuous nature was just something that he couldn't keep under wraps for very long periods of time. If it hadn't been fixed by now, then there was nothing Yoruichi could do at this point. What do need us to do for you, Yamamoto Soteishu? It's nothing major, I assure you, Yamamoto stated in an exact manner, and yes, you will be compensated for this request if that really matters to you. We're listening, Naruto said, turning his eyes towards Yoruichi, who happened to be giving him a light glare. What? I'm not working my first actual assignment from the Siriidii for free. I haven't had an actual paying job in forever, he told her, emphasizing the paying part of his statement since she technically never paid him for all of his trouble from assisting in the rescue of Rukia. It's a very simple job, not complicated at all, Yamamoto claimed. You won't have to do any actual work at all, come to think of it. Even if there was no work for this job, neither of them liked the way that sounded. Naruto was reminded once again from the serene look on Yamamoto's face that he really didn't like old men that were still older than him. Because that meant that life experience still gave them at least one extra trick up their sleeve more than him. XXX. Nightfall, Karakura Town. Yuryu was looking down in the back of an alleyway with his cell phone out and by his ear. The patrol around town for any possible hollows on the prowl led to a strange discovery as darkness began to settle. Ah, well, hello there to you. Urahara's enthusiastic voice came over the other line. Hearing the man's voice, Yuryu immediately launched into conversation. Urahara-san, I think I've found something extremely dashed. Urahara's voice then picked up once more, cutting Yuryu off. Thank you for contacting Urahara shop. Your call is very important to us. Unfortunately, no one is able to reach the phone to help you at this time, so please leave a message and I promise we'll get back to you at the soonest possible convenience. God damn it, Yuryu muttered as he hung his phone up and pocketed it. He then kneeled down and reached a hand out to touch two lifeless bodies on the ground. They had no wounds on them and there was no sign of a hollow attack anywhere around either. As Yuryu adjusted his glasses on his face, why do these people look as if their souls were just sucked out of their bodies? He asked no one in particular.